So I'm here today to talk about something which is a great interest of mine. It's about making the human body an integrated part of the Internet of Things. So I'm going to give you some entertaining examples of what can be done and what we are doing. And I should also mention that in the nighttime, when I'm not hanging out at Epicenter doing disruption things, I'm also one of the founders of the Swedish Association of Biohackers. And for those of you who don't know what biohacking is, I'll give you a very brief intro to the very concept of biohacking. So what is biohacking? Biohacking is sort of a subculture of people who experiment with technology and biological systems. Anything from trying to modify the genetics of a bacteria to make them smell like bananas, or building your own equipment to run a little biolab in your student dorm. And also we biohackers, we are a loosely organized group with no affiliations with governments or big companies. We really like to do things of our own. So we have very much a grassroots and activist perspective on what we do. Just to give you a brief overview, who's involved in the biohacker movement? We have people who are do-it-yourself biologists. So it's very much a lab thing where you want to do DNA analysis to find out this mystic hair that you found on your wife's pillow, for example. You sample it and you can see where it comes from. How many of you guys are familiar with quantified self? I would expect that to be... Okay, you're too tired to raise hands. More coffee, pal. Anyway, quantified self-logging, using wearables and other devices to take data, logging your activities, and then using a scientific approach where n equals 1. So you make tests. Will I sleep better or not if I have a cup of coffee at 9 in the evening? And you do that randomly over a period of time, and you begin to see a pattern. Yes, it affects my, statistically, how many good hours of sleep I get per night. Also part of the biohacker community is something we call grinders. Grinders is people with a background in piercing and body modification communities. And these guys have a fantastic knowledge of what you can actually put into the human body. I mean, and historically it's mostly been used for aesthetic purposes. So piercings and subdermal implants that can give you different looks on your skin. But when we are now having these people meet people who do smart tech, some very interesting innovation is actually happening. And then the final fourth part are people who are what we call body hackers. And this is very much inspired by professional athletes, for example, who like to, how do I optimize my performance? What do I eat? Do I take nutritional supplements? How do I manage my sleep? So even if I'm an office worker and not exactly a professional athlete, how do I perform, on a high level throughout the full day in front of my screen? So those are the things that, it's a very diverse crowd, this biohacker crowd. So biohacking, to give you just an illustrative example of what we do, so if you want to have a lab and you want to centrifuge proteins to separate them, you normally have to buy a quite expensive equipment called a centrifuge. But what you also can do is you can download a template and 3D print this little yellow thing that you see here on the screen, and you put it on a power drill, and it costs 5 krona, and then you stick your test tubes out there and you can spin it, and it actually works just as fine. So this is what we do. Another classic biohack is, of course, the remote control roach. Have you seen this? It's quite funny. You simply super glue a little electrical chip on the back of a cockroach. You put tiny electrodes on the 4 main antennas they have in the front and back. And then there is an app where you can actually, which is called Roboroach, where you can remote control a cockroach by giving it small electrical shocks on the antenna so it navigates around the room. This is what we find so exciting. And this is about hacking biological systems and merging us with technology. Another example we do, so have you heard of transcranial direct current stimulation? It's a technology where you put a very weak current through your head. And there are scientific tests that show that this improves, for example, learning. If you study French vocabulary, you remember more in certain tests. So we build our own devices. You can buy expensive devices online, of course, that's not for us. So this is an instance where we tested this equipment. I'm not sure my memory was much better that day, but it cured my hangover. So it was pretty kick-ass. But I have to say that it probably requires further research before we can see if this is generally applicable. Another thing we do is, of course, we find RFID implants is a very interesting technology. So we arrange implant parties in the Swedish biohacker community where we take these little tags you typically put in animals and we put them under our own skin. I mean, some of you may look a bit worried now, but I'll tell you this is a perfectly safe and it's a very well-known technology. We've been using this on industrial scale for 25, 30 years in animals, and we know that there are no sort of physical negative effects for the body to have this implant. It's encased in a biosafe, especially hardened glass. So, and then you can do quite a few cool things with it, which I'm going to show you now. The way it started was that we saw it, as many cool inventions start nowadays, we saw it on Indiegogo. There was a chip that suddenly was NFC compatible. It was the first. And we said, hey, let's try this. And we brought together, we bought a whole bunch of kits, and then we had our implant party. And then we said, okay, let's discover what we actually can do with this now. And this was almost to the day a year ago. And we have learned a lot. I'm going to share with you a few learnings from this fun biohacker experiment that we've done. So for me personally, the insight I started with was that every day when I walk out the door, I have to put a lot of junk in my pockets. Keys, wallets, swipe cards, key fobs, and all of these things, or most of them, are really just identification devices. And thanks to the great bankers we have in the world, we've actually gotten rid of coins, right? So we don't have to carry metal pieces with the head of a king anymore. But we still have to carry metal pieces for opening doors, which I find quite ancient now in the 21st century. So instead of having to carry keys, one individual key for all the different locks, for my bike, for my house, for the car, for the cupboard, and all these swipe cards in my wallet that I use for the gym, for the library, for memberships, etc. What if we could merge them and make it simpler, and also have something which I did not need to carry in my pockets, but which was always with me and that I couldn't lose? So this is what I have replaced to date with my implant. It's my gym card, it's my business cards. So I have my little implant here. If someone wants to swipe my hand, you get my contacts straight into your phone. Various keys to cupboards, these loyalty cards where you get 10 stamps, you get the 10th coffee for free. I mean, it's not world-changing stuff, but it's cool to experiment. Key fobs, when I go into the office, I just swipe my hand. When I log into the printers or I turn off the alarm, it's really just by swiping the hand in front of these readers. Because the cool thing, as you guys know, because you're a smart bunch who understand this type of technology, is that NFC readers are pretty much everywhere already. So, and this is also why this technology is interesting now, but RFID implants for humans wasn't very interesting 10 years ago because we didn't have these connected readers and devices all around us. And it's just about 2 years since we started getting NFC into the smartphones as well. I've also replaced the PIN code to my phone, for example. I just swipe it on my implant now as a way of unlocking it, which is pretty cool. So we call these really stupid implants Generation 1 implants, because it's really just an ID tag and you can put some text on the side of it. But it already has a lot of pretty cool uses. So I'm just going to give you some entertaining examples. We mentioned, of course, entering buildings. It's pretty basic. This is, okay, I'm trying to look badass here in this picture, but you can tell I'm not a real gangster. So the idea here is that we want to show that there's a very interesting user case if you can have a security function of a handgun connected to an implant in the hand. So I am currently modifying a soft air gun with the little door lock that I have. which will allow me to lock and unlock the gun just by holding it in my hand. And this means, I mean, Sweden is a country where most people don't have handguns at home, but there are other countries where people do, and we read these terrible stories of children finding a gun and hurting themselves or family members. And if we have this security system connected to an implant, then you can really be sure that it's only the person who has the implant that can actually use that gun. Now, for those of you who are not into guns, this works, of course, with any type of technology, like your electrical toothbrush. So if you don't want your wife to borrow your electrical toothbrush, you know, when she touches it, it just blinks red and makes aggressive, angry noise. But when you touch it, you know, it's green lights and nice music and warm cuddles. Just to give you an impression how non-gangster and how nerdy we guys are in the biohacker group. So we had a long conversation, we had a little workshop. So what stuff do we want to personalize with our implants? And someone said, well, it would be really bad if someone would take your lightsaber. Yeah, you don't want someone to take, you know, and use it against you, and those should be very personal. And then we discussed this for about 10 minutes until someone said, hey guys, are lightsabers invented yet? And we were, oh, no. But everyone was just totally into that conversation, just like it was an everyday item. So you understand, we are geeks. My wearable has died. Okay, I have to use old clicking by hand again, sorry. Personalization of equipment is another interesting use case. I mean, for us, having an implant is very much about removing friction of all this everyday identification and having to adjust settings on smart things. So when you're using something, you're anyway touching it. And if you, let's say you have a family car. Me and my partner, I'm tall, she's short, whenever. We share the same family car. This is not our car, by the way. I have to readjust the settings, change the mirrors, change the seat. What if we could just put a really cheap, 50 krona NFC reader in the steering wheel? I mean, the energy is there, the systems are all there, and simply by sitting down in the car and grabbing the wheel to begin my driving, the car adjusts to my settings. I mean, this for me is what I want smart technology to do for me around us. I don't want to sit there and mess with particular settings around. In health, I mean, we have just a lot of things about IoT in health. To me, there are now gyms where you have a card and you register at every machine that logs exactly how much activity of exercise you spend, X amount of minutes, and you lift how many kilos of weights that you lift. But to me, again, if you could just have, if people were implanted and you just had readers in the handles of the machine, again, this would be a much more frictionless user experience, and you could log that data in a more interesting way. Implants also serve an interesting role in sort of a verification system. I mean, we have all these ways where we, when we approve or we log into systems, and it's usually multi-factor systems. So you have, typically you have a bank card and a PIN code, or you have a key fob and a PIN code. But where I see implants is another item in this ecosystem. So maybe an implant will not replace the bank card as such, but maybe it will be easy to replace the PIN code. So we have these payment terminals in restaurants or cabs, and you just swipe your card and then you approve the payment with the implant, and there's no one who can see the PIN code over your shoulder. I have, as a matter of fact, also made payments using this implant, connecting to this cool company in Denmark, which is called Beeptify. They make NFC-enabled wristbands that you use at music festivals. So if you want to go headbanging in front of your favorite band for a few hours, you may not want to have your wallet in the pocket of your jacket. You leave it at home. And instead you can put 300 Danish krona in your NFC tag, you wear it on a wristband, and you can go and buy your beer or water or whatever. So, but I connected myself to their system, and I used it in various vending machines that they had to purchase stuff. So it really works, also for payments. The good thing with this was that I used it's like a separate e-wallet. I transfer as much money as I want into this wallet instead of connecting it directly to my big bank account, which perhaps I would be a bit more careful with. You can also store information on this chip, just a little, but so here are some uses for that. Now, to give you, I mean, you are tech folks, and you certainly have a good understanding of tech history. And the way I think of implants is that it represents a cool interface which really makes my interacting with the Internet of Things easier and more frictionless. And looking back at tech history, we can see that there are important, so to say, interface moments where an innovation happened that made human technology interaction a lot easier. And then that in turn gave rise to a whole new field of business, and a lot of new companies were founded. I mean, here are some classical examples. The first Windows desktop. I mean, you guys probably know how to use MS-DOS and what computers were like before we had Windows, but it was a lot harder and it was a lot more exclusive to use computers. When suddenly someone made a trash can look like a trash can and you could drag your document into it, it made using computers accessible to so many more people. Same goes for using the internet. Some of you guys for sure used, I can tell, used the internet in the early to mid-90s. Before we had browsers. And if you remember these index files and BBS systems that we had to use, that was incredibly complicated to navigate. You had to know what you were looking for in order to find it. And then we got the first browser that represented a new interface for searching for information on the web. And how many new companies has not the browser interface as such giving rise to? I mean, there are these global giants like Google and Yahoo and I mean, you know how many of them that have come out of this new interface system. And, of course, requires no further explanation, the touchscreen smartphone that gave rise to the whole app economy. And how many companies are now not founded on this particular new interface. And I personally think that chip implants may not be as massively important as these, but it has some really, really cool functionalities within this space. So I often get the question, well, you already have fingerprints. I mean, there are companies in this city of Lund, right, that work specifically with this. I've also lost money on them. Sorry if there's any, no names mentioned. So fingerprints is a cool way of identifying yourself. However, it is, if you require the computers to understand biology, biology is messy, right? It changes. Or if you, I mean, fingerprints or voice recognition, as I show here. My voice changes if I'm stressed, if I have a cold, if I've been running, and I have to identify myself. And it is difficult for the machines to still read and understand our biological signals. But if you look the other way around, if I put an NFC implant in my hand, immediately it's my body that speaks the language that all the machines are already speaking. So they understand NFC, it's their natural language, whatever we want to call it. And in this way, the misunderstandings simply disappear. So it's very effortless to use and requires a lot less sort of smart analytics and machine learning to understand, as the opposite of biology. So I mentioned generation 1 implants. I'm also involved in various ways with developing next generation smarter implants, which is not a stupid tag that you stick in the neck of a cat. And we're seeing some very, very interesting uses coming up on the horizon. I mean, we mentioned this digital identification, of course, for opening. This is very basic, but to have implants that actually capture data from the body, what we currently today see that wearables are doing. We know that sensors are becoming smaller, processors are becoming cheaper, and we can make these implants very, very tiny already. And by being under the skin, we can capture much better data than you can do outside the skin. So there are some very interesting experiments now where people are wearing implants that log stuff like pulse, temperature, etc. And I'm sure we will see this in the market in a year or two. So I'm also very interested in, having the activist and hacker background that I come from, of enabling encryption for us to take better control of the data. The implant serves a very interesting role here. If you use this for logging in, you can actually encrypt some of your communication. Okay, I'm going to speed up. This is the final part of my talk. So now you've learned a bit about chip implants, but connecting the body is about a lot more than tiny chip implants. I mean, we have an explosion of wearables. And I've put some buzzwords here. I mean, you have hearables, smart earbuds, wearables that alert you to something happening in your body. We have the word underwear, which we use for the stuff you put under your skin. And then on the bottom part here, we have the whole med tech aspect, which is also rapidly developing right now. One thing I'm missing though, and if there's any smart person in here who want to help me prototype this, is smart dental implants. Can't believe this has not happened. We already have a huge industry that put artificial stuff in people's mouths. It's a very good place to enter the body to capture data from inside the body because it's an opening and you get access to body fluids which you don't get outside the skin. And I see the mouth as a fantastic platform to put cool hardware and sensors. But I'm looking for any company who does this, and I think this in itself is a billion-dollar business if done right. And to put implants and artificial stuff in the mouth like we do today and just use them for chewing, give me a break. I mean, we're not cows. So there's so much stuff, if people already have artificial stuff in the mouth, that we, people like you, could help put in these implants to make them a lot smarter. And wearables, if you take a step back, is about so much more than fitness trackers. When we speak of wearables, we often think of, Fitbits or whatever. But we're seeing an absolute explosion in wearable technology. We have smart clothes, like down here in the corner, it's something called Alert Shirt. It's a fan jersey. It was developed for Aussie football team. It has tactile sensors in it, so when a player is tackled on the field, the fans feel it as a hit in the chest. So you really have a different live experience. It's really cool. You check it out. It's called Alert Shirt. So we have sensory enhancement. For example, here's a wearable. It looks like a jewel, but it's actually an ultraviolet light logger. So it gives you a warning if you spend too much time out in the sun. Okay, now it's time to go into the shade or put on some more sunscreen. We have, I don't know if some of you guys work with some of the other smart tech companies in town, but we know that on the road maps, we see smart contact lenses that will give you information. And we have the concept of exoskeletons. Here's a shipyard worker in Korea lifting this 50-kilo metal rod using his exoskeleton. And thinking of how technology is developing, how robotics are improving, I'm quite sure that in a couple of generations, these exoskeletons will look no different than this blue blåkläder that normal factory workers wear today. And you can still have this increased strength in doing things. So this field is absolutely exploding, and the biggest companies in the world are involved. Apple and Samsung and all Sony are into this, as well as massive innovation. If you look at places like Kickstarter and Indiegogo, a lot of cool innovation happening in this field. I should mention also smart sanitary pads. They exist. There's interesting data in coming out of your blood. You can get a lot of health data, and there you can connect smart sanitary pads to an app, and you can get health logging out of that. So it's another interesting disposable wearable somewhere in between. And I don't know if some of you guys are into the medtechs as well, but what we've seen in medtech is that this is not new. We've had pacemakers since the 1960s, right? But what has happened lately is that they are becoming connected and they are becoming appified. So I have a friend, she's got a hearing aid, but she manages it, of course, by way of an app. So she wants to turn down the noise or filter out some sounds. It's very easy to do. I have another friend, her kid is a diabetic, and she monitors her kid's glucose level and inserts insulin by way of an app. So it's all merging this field. I mean, medtech is merging with wearables and with the app economy. And this is a really, really cool ecosystem of the connected body that we should really think of when we think of the IoT. Another fun example, here's a biohacker guy that I really like, Frank Swain. He has hearing aid implantables because he was born with bad hearing. And he has hacked, together with a friend who is a music designer, so that he can hear Wi-Fi. And every Wi-Fi has its own unique IP number. And then they have made so it converted into a little melody. So when he walks down the streets of London, he hears like bird song. Exactly, you would walk down the streets because he gets the direction and he gets the strength of the Wi-Fi when he walks down the street. So, okay, there's the Ernst & Young office. Oh, that's the cafe on the corner. Oh, they have changed. And to me, this is really cool because you can do interesting things with this technology to give your body completely new capabilities. So it's a different level of doing things. And this is a sort of upgrading your senses to the 21st century. And, you know, being a bit visionary here, we know that we have sensors spread out all over the planet to monitor, for example, for earthquakes and tsunamis. And we now have the potential to connect those to our bodies. And you can, if you want to be one with the ecosystem, you can. Because you can put sensors and you can connect them to data streams that exist out there. And you can feel when there is an earthquake in Iran, like a wave in your stomach. Or you can have satellites logging, looking at when they cut down forests in the Amazon, and you can feel that as having someone pulling hairs out of your arm. So wouldn't this be a cool simulator to run our politicians and decision makers in? I mean, this is all doable, right? When we think of the connected body and we look at the data out there that we can feed into our sensory system, it's quite mind-blowing. So, to sum up, my final picture, making the body a part of the Internet of Things is about a number of things. So, base case, making simply our day-to-day interaction with technology simpler and more frictionless. It's about capturing body data, but improving as well the managing of our body systems, like the quantified selfers do. Okay, knowing when I should eat, when I should sleep, if I should take coffee or not, to simply improve how I feel and my performance and my overall health. But then taking it to the next level, we can really use the Internet of Things to give the body completely new sensory input, like my friend who listens to the Wi-Fi by his aids, or in many, many other ways. And with ideas like connecting exoskeletons, etc., you can give the body completely new functions. So it's a very, very exciting field. I am fundamentally convinced that this is going to explode. It's already exploding. And what we are seeing today with these little implants is just the beginning of something that will, modify our bodies and make us look very different upon ourselves as humans. So thank you very much for listening. Can I breathe now?